Included.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Launch Codes Football. My name is Chris,
And I'm Chelsea.
and today we are talking about week 17 of the NFL season. We have one more week to go of games before the playoffs. Chelsea, how you feeling today?
Feeling weird considering every other NFL season, this has been the last week of the regular season. This is the only, at least in modern history, the only week in modern history where we have 18 weeks. So cheers to another week of football.
I know, right? Hey, the players voted on it. So whether people hate it or not, they voted.
I
So
mean, if they didn't want it, they shouldn't have voted.
exactly. So either way, let's get right into it. We're going to start the week recap with Big Ben yesterday, Monday Night Football. Very emotional game for those of you who were able to watch it. We had Big Ben Rothlisberger, playing his last game in Pittsburgh at home, probably. I mean, unless something crazy happens, they can still make the playoffs, and if something crazy happens there. But this is the last regular season home game for Big Ben in Pittsburgh. I don't know if he's done, but it seems to me like it was a pretty big goodbye and he was taking it all in. And so I thought it was a pretty cool to see at the end. Big Ben hands it off to Najee Harris, and Najee runs right in for the touchdown. It's almost like the Browns almost kind of gave it to him. I know they weren't trying to because the game was still within reach, but that was going to be something that Ben Roethlisberger will remember for forever, is just hearing the crowd cheering, everyone saying thank you, Ben. It was a very cool emotional moment, and even though I'm not a huge Steelers fan or anything like that, I thought it was still a really cool moment and just nice. I think ESPN did a good job of just letting the crowd noise kind of sell the game. The commentators weren't talking too much in that moment, which I think is something that's very underrated by commentators, is knowing when not to talk, because sometimes you just got to let the noise of the game, just kind of carry. So I thought this was really cool. Ben Roethlisberger did his thing, getting a win at home against Cleveland, the team who passed on him for a tight end. Can you believe that? They pass on him for a tight end, and for like 15 years now, or whatever it's been, he has been dominating Cleveland. And in some ways, it's kind of fitting that he wins his last home game against Cleveland after they passed on him. And he's from Ohio. So that had to hurt him. So Chelsea, I don't know. What did you think of this emotional goodbye?
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm no way a Steelers fan. Ben Roethlisberger was time and time again tough to take down in the regular season and the playoffs during the Peyton Manning era. I mean, Peyton Manning is the second best quarterback of all time, and Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers always played the Colts tough, even when we had Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne and Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney and all the Indianapolis Colts greats. He always played them well. I mean, he was drafted when we were little kids. So I mean, we basically grew up with Ben Roethlisberger, just like how we grew up with Eli Manning and Philip Rivers, and now they're like all leaving the league, and it just makes you feel old. And I'm not even old; I'm 23, but it makes me feel old.
Yeah, kind of crazy. Very just kind of interested to see with this Pittsburgh team. As much as the Pittsburgh fans hate on Mike Tomlin, I think it is amazing to me to see how he hasn't had a losing season. I mean, while at Pittsburgh, and I think that's just incredible. I mean, I really thought Pittsburgh might have been dead in the water this year. And, while Roethlisberger wasn't great yesterday, he was good enough to win the game. And that's all he needs to be. Tom Brady, I would still say he's pretty great at what he does. But, he's not the Tom Brady he was 10 years ago, but he gets it done. And Ben Roethlisberger, I think, has started to learn how to do that. I think it took him a while to adjust on how exactly to do that. But the Steelers are trying to really lean into Najee Harris, and they're trying to lean into that run game to get them to the playoffs. And right now, I mean, maybe they're not Super Bowl contenders, but they are playoff contenders right now. Now they have a chance to go get it against the Ravens in Baltimore. It's going to be a huge game. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think I'm impressed with what the Steelers have been able to do after last year's hard end to the season. I mean, starting out 11-0 and then just kind of dropping off by the end of the season. I don't know. I don't know what you think, Chelsea, but I'm impressed because I really didn't think that the Steelers would be that good this year, but they've stayed competitive, and they, like TJ Watt saving the game against the Seahawks. I mean, that was impressive. They've had things go their way. So I don't know. I think it'll be a very interesting end to the season for the Steelers this year.
I mean, I think right now the Steelers are just mediocre. I think at the beginning of last season, they were a lot better than they are now, especially their defense. I mean, yeah, they still have TJ Watt who's dominating, and they still have Cameron Hayward who's consistent every week, and Minka Fitzpatrick. Like, they still have those key guys on their defense. But as a whole, they just haven't played the same as they did last year. So that was surprising to me, at least based on the first half of the year. Now, obviously, the second half, we saw a drop off, right? And they lost all those games in a row, which is very surprising to everyone because the Steelers looked dominant, especially on defense. And then that happened, and everyone was like, what's going on with the Steelers? So I think that their defense is definitely the best part of their team. Like, if I had to pick their offense or their defense, I would 10 times out of 10 pick their defense. I will make a note. I thought that Ben Roethlisberger should have retired last year at the end of last year, with his injuries and how you could pretty obviously see that he was falling off a cliff, right? From where he was to where he then was, but he decided to come back and give it a final run. And honestly, he's been pretty good this year. Like, based on what we saw at the end of last year, he could have been a lot worse this year, and he wasn't. So kudos to him for like not going out on a low note, Like, you never want to see guys end their careers with like the worst game of their career,
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, as we've talked about this year, the Steelers O-line is notoriously bad, right? I mean, most of the guys on that O-line that are starting are probably second or third stringers on teams with strong O-lines. I will say an amendment to that, though. You still have to give them some credit because Najee Harris has 296 rushes this year for 1,172 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, is his average the best? I mean, it's not the best. His average is 4 yards a carry. So, I mean, it's not the best. It's not the worst. But for how much the Steelers O-line has been hated on and for how many injuries they're dealing with and their lack of depth and their lack of real starters, the fact that Najee Harris has almost 1,200 yards with 1 game remaining is pretty impressive. Like, you would not think watching the Steelers that he would have that many yards. I mean, that just proves to you how much they use him, right? They're just running him over and over and over and over and over. So, but I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due. If the Steelers had a strong O-line like what the Colts have or what the Saints have or any of those teams, I mean, Najee Harris would probably have 1,500 rushing yards. If he has 1,100 behind a line of guys that are second and third stringers on strong O-line teams, I mean, if he had a solid O-line, he'd probably have at least a couple hundred more yards, if not more. So you got to give credit where credit is due. They've obviously had receiver issues this year. Chase Claypool I don't even know what he is. I don't know how Mike Tomlin is surviving that, but he is. Juju's been out with an injury, right? I mean, they've had some drop issues. So like I said, I would take the defense over the offense, but you do have to give credit where it's due. And Ben Roethlisberger has made the most of what he could, right? I mean, Ben Roethlisberger went from having Antonio Brown, who, arguably, if he had continued his career on the trajectory that it was on, could have been a Hall of Famer and maybe the best wide receiver ever. He went from him and Le'Veon Bell, who was dominant, to, Juju Smith-Schuster and Najee Harris. And not that those guys are bad, but when you go from that and you lose like 3 cornerstone linemen you've played with for 10 years, like the team's going to look different. And for how different the team looks, I think he did a really good job. I mean, he could have been a lot worse, especially behind that O line. I mean, the dude's been pounded this year, the entire season because of his O line. So, and he is still putting up decent stats. So, kudos to him. I mean, I'm glad that he got the ovation that he did because even though I'm not his biggest fan, I mean, he admittedly is what Pittsburgh is known for, right? He is the face of Pittsburgh. They said on the broadcast yesterday that the naming rights for Heinz Field, I'm pretty sure, are up after this year. Ben Roethlisberger also may retire after this year. No two things in Pittsburgh are more synonymous with the Steelers than Heinz Field and Ben Roethlisberger. So if Ben Roethlisberger retires and Heinz Field gets named something else, you really do know that it's a new era in Pittsburgh because those things have been Pittsburgh for, I mean, over a decade.
Can't wait for the new crypto field, right? Or Dogecoin field,
crypto.com stadium. Seriously, couldn't make it even more of a mouthful than it already is.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, I agree. I think, and it's just going to be an interesting way to end it. And kind of transitioning into our next topic here, because you mentioned him, I think we got to talk about him. Probably
Obviously.
one of the biggest stories in the whole NFL week. Antonio Brown storms out of Jets Stadium in anger, ripping his shirt off and his gear and everything, and leaving his like pads and everything on the bench, and says peace to the crowd. And he shoots up a peace sign.
Boy, bye.
He said, I'm gone. Middle of the game. In the middle of the game, man just leaves. Basically, I believe there was some issues between him and the coach on the sideline. He didn't like it. Coach said, all right, tough luck, basically. And yeah, I mean, and we have what we have now. Antonio Brown probably being done in the NFL, which is honestly, that sucks for Tampa because they're already kind of short at receiver. I mean, they've still got pieces and they'll still make it work, I think. But, you know, Antonio Brown, even though he was the third receiver on that team, is still one of the best in the league, which is just crazy. And it shows you how good the receiving core is. But, you know, I don't know. This was just, I don't think anyone was surprised by this. Were they? Like, no. I hate to say it. I think that it's not really surprising to me. I think probably Antonio Brown has mental issues, and that's something that, you know, in all seriousness needs to be addressed in a serious manner. So I'm not making light of that. I mean, I guess he may not have that. We don't really know, but it definitely seems like it, the erratic behavior and things like that. I mean, I don't know if it's from playing football or what. I mean, we saw what Vontaze Burfict did to him. You're telling me there was no long-term injury off of that hit or other hits, you know? I don't know. So honestly, I kind of hated to see this, but it did kind of get the Tampa Bay Bucs going, because after that they started moving the ball and they ended up beating the Jets on a game-winning drive. Wow. Shocker. Tom Brady beats the Jets.
Spoiler alert.
Tom Brady driving down the field to score a touchdown against the Jets. I mean,
what's new?
If this was Tom Brady's last year, how funny would it be? I mean, he beat the Bills. He beat the Jets. He's just beaten that whole, like, I'm just like, this man is just doing what he wants to any team.
He's dominating his old division without even being in his old division.
He beat the Patriots earlier this year in Foxborough. I'm like, literally, this man's crazy. He's just, I think and it's just, I mean, he's just literally doing what he's been doing for years, and he's just on another team.
You aren't done with me yet, boys.
Exactly. You thought just because I moved conferences, I wasn't done whipping you. So, I don't know, crazy stuff with that. I mean, still an impressive game. I mean, they were just not playing well. And then they just turned it back on, and that's what Super Bowl contenders can do. So I don't know, but Chelsea, do you think Antonio Brown is done in the NFL for good now? Are we ever going to see him on another down, another play?
I mean, let's think about it. Like I was talking about in the Ben Roethlisberger segment. I mean, Antonio Brown was unarguably the best wide receiver in the league for a couple of years and was 100% on track to make the Hall of Fame and
Hmm.
was making his case to be one of the best, if not the best, ever, based on the trajectory his stats were taking. Now, obviously, with the way his career has gone after that, the likelihood of those things happening is very, very low now. But I mean, the dude fell off a cliff. I mean, he was amazing in Pittsburgh. And then he just started doing dumb things. And then he went to other places and did more dumb things. And I just, it's honestly heartbreaking. I am in the boat that thinks that he does have mental issue, which is sad and needs to be addressed, and he needs legitimate help. I hope he doesn't flee from that out of embarrassment or pride or whatever it may be. I hope that he legitimately goes and, tries to figure out something that he can do for himself. He definitely needs prayer at the least. But I mean, I don't see another team taking a chance on him unless they are 100% desperate. And I don't know if any team is going to be that desperate again. Now, there were reports that Bruce Arians said that he was off the team, right? After the game and everything. I read something today that said he has not been officially released, that the NFL and the NFLPA are trying to figure out how to go about this situation, maybe in a different direction than people thought. Which, if they're doing that because they're legitimately worried about his health, I'm glad that they're doing that. Now, he very well may have actually been released. I didn't, read to comparative reports or anything, but I just saw a headline that said he hadn't officially been released from the team. I hope that someone goes and finds him and takes him somewhere safe, where he can go and chill out for a bit, because something's just off. And it's just sad. I mean, even Tom Brady expressed after the game, he seems to indicate that there was stuff going on that didn't have anything to do with football. So, I mean, really, none of us are ever going to truly know because we're not there, right? And we're not around Antonio Brown. We don't know Antonio Brown as a person. We don't know everything he's been through. We don't know his true medical history that hasn't been revealed to the public, right? So, there are just some things that we're never going to know. So, I'm not going to speculate on those. But as for him getting another chance in the league, I don't know. I think the chances are very slim unless someone literally has no other options, because there are guys you can always sign that are not Antonio Brown. Are they going to be as good as Antonio Brown? No, definitely not, especially prime Antonio Brown. But there's always going to be someone else that you can pick up that is not him. Um, I don't know. It's just heartbreaking. I hope that he gets the help that he needs. It definitely hurts the Bucs because the Bucs lost Godwin already to a season-ending injury. They are presumably losing AB forever, presumably. I mean, Mike Evans is still dealing with a hamstring injury. I mean, they have Gronkowski, but apparently he fractured 3 ribs and punctured his lung. So I mean, who knows what percentage of healthy he is. They lost Leonard Fournette. So I mean, and they're still going out there and still beating people. So I mean, that just proves, how much their defense has rebounded, for one, since the beginning of the year, and how good Tom Brady is. I mean, if you have a good defense, you have Tom Brady. I mean, we've seen for years, Tom Brady can make a bunch of nobodies look like superstars. So I mean, this is really nothing new. Like Tom Brady never had the receivers that he has now in Foxborough. Like Tom Brady never had a Mike Evans in Foxborough.
He did
never
have
had
Randy Moss though,
but not prime Randy Moss.
but pretty good Randy Moss though.
I mean, yeah, but if you subtract Randy Moss, I mean, he never had a Mike Evans. He never had a Godwin. Not that the guys that he had were awful. I mean, he had Wes Welker and, a bunch of other guys, But if you had put those guys on other teams, does anyone legitimately think that they had been as good as they were if they were not with Tom Brady? Because everyone knows Tom Brady makes everyone around him better. Tom Brady makes the best players in the league around him better because he's Tom Brady. It's just what he does. So I think the Patriots will be fine. I mean, they might have a dropped ball or two that they might not have, if Antonio Brown was catching it. But I mean, regardless, I think that they could probably still make the NFC Championship if they play well and put up points. So, I mean, like I said, we've seen Tom Brady do this for his whole career with a bunch of people no one knew who they were until Tom Brady made them notable, right? So, I mean, I don't think it'll be an issue.
That's fair. I mean, yes, I do agree. He's like made people who probably wouldn't have been as good even better. Like Wes Welker, like you said. I mean, Danny Amendola, Rex Burkhead, all became like household names because they were on the Patriots. So,
it's not like those guys were bad players on their own. Like they weren't. They were good players. But if they had not played with Tom Brady, they would not be as notarized in history as they currently are.
But I do want to say that Tom Brady had Gronk, who's still has him, and he's one of the best tight ends of all time, and Randy Moss on the same team at one point. But I do see what you're saying. As far as the receiver position, a lot of times he has made small like route runners look very good. So I can see that. But either way, I think personally, just to give a quick take into this, Antonio Brown's best chance of coming back to the NFL is if Tampa Bay calls him. I think after that, I don't really see how or why another team would want him. Or why
I don't foresee Mike Tomlin being like, Antonio Brown, would you like to return? Like, that's not going to happen.
No,
I don't see Bill Belichick being like, hey, buddy, come on back. We could use some drama. Like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So I think Antonio Brown's best chance is if Tampa calls him and says, you know what, can we just go to the playoffs with you and just win a Super Bowl? Like, we just need a few games out of you. And then I don't know if he'd be done after that, but we'll see. If he wins a Super Bowl and doesn't do anything in the playoffs, that's too crazy. He actually might still have a chance in the NFL, honestly. But we'll see what happens. So next we're going to move on to the game picks. We have 3 games picked this week. And since we've talked a lot about the Steelers, might as well throw in their game against the Ravens. So Chelsea, I see that you picked the Steelers to win this game against the Ravens. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't think the Ravens are going to make the playoffs now. And because they're not going to make the playoffs, I don't think they're going to bring Lamar Jackson back because they want to make sure that Lamar Jackson can play for the next 10 years. So I don't foresee him playing. It'll probably be Huntley again, unless Lamar Jackson just convinces John Harbaugh to let him play. And on the smallest chance that they can make the playoffs. But I mean, the probability of them making the playoffs is very small now. Still exists, but it's very small. I'm going to take the Steelers just because I think that they're going to be riding high with Ben Roethlisberger's last game at home. I think that Najee Harris is underrated. And I think that TJ Watt can probably chase down Tyler Huntley if he tried hard enough. So I'm going to go with the Steelers.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go with the Steelers as well. I think they'll ride high off of the last game that they just had. Very emotional game for them, and I think that momentum will carry them. A lot of times when you have big emotional games, sometimes you can have a deflating performance, but I think with the Steelers still having a winning record on the line and, still a shot at the playoffs, I'm going to say I think that they will win this game.
I will say, though, side note, I don't think that it was the lack of Lamar Jackson that killed the Ravens season. I think it was everything else. All of the injuries that they suffered in the secondary really killed them, especially when you're playing against the likes of Joe Burrow and, Lamar Jackson. That kills you. And then you lose like 4 running backs, and that's the identity of your team. Like, yeah, Lamar Jackson is really good. And yeah, Lamar Jackson can run the ball. But ultimately, Lamar Jackson is a quarterback. Like, he cannot do the whole offensive game plan by himself, And I mean, I think that the guys that they picked up have filled in as well as you can expect. But when you lose 2, 3, 4 starting caliber running backs and 3 to 4 starting caliber superstar secondary players. I mean, you're just not gonna
What
be
are you
able to
gonna
get
do?
to where you are. I mean, yeah, it's the next man up mentality, but when you lose a third of your offense and a third of your defense, that's just tough. Like
Mm-hmm.
Lamar Jackson going down didn't help, but by the time Lamar Jackson went down, they were kind of already sinking.
All right. I can agree with that. So next we've got the Chargers at the Raiders. I'm gonna go with the Chargers. The Raiders, I mean, both of these teams have the same record.
Oh, I
Um,
know.
and I think this will be interesting. I mean, the Raiders got to win this one. But I
Mm.
do think Justin Herbert and the Chargers will be able to get it done over the Raiders. I do think they are better all around. I mean, the Raiders like are weird. They're not bad. They played well sometimes, but sometimes they play really bad.
Oh, I
Are we
know.
going to get good Raiders or are we going to get bad Raiders? Who knows? So I'm going to go with the
Yeah, who
Chargers.
knows? I don't know anything about that.
You sound salty.
I am salty. My coworker at work is a Raiders fan, and he was texting me Raiders gifts today. I was like, first of all, record. Let's like compare
Uh-huh.
those.
One's in, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he was like, touche. I was like, indeed. But I'm also going to go with the Chargers. I think the Chargers are better all around. I think the Chargers have a better shot of making some noise in the playoffs than the Raiders do. I mean, the Raiders, talk about a tumultuous season, right? I mean, you lose Ruggs to prison, right? You lose Arnett to prison. I think. I mean, at minimum, he got released. You lose John Gruden to who even knows? Like various strange things that happened. Apparently, another one of their rookies got arrested for like a DUI or something after the Colts game. So there's another one. They have the entire NFL looking into them almost as much as the NFL is looking into Washington, which is a whole other story. Let's not talk about that. But they just have had just the worst, weird, mediocre season ever. I mean, they still have Josh Jacobs, who's really good. They still have Derek Carr, who's like above average. And like they still have Hunter Renfrow and Zay Jones, who clearly are also above average if you're playing the Colts, I guess. But yeah, I'm still going to go with the Chargers. I think that Herbert has too much on the line to be able to be taken down by a divisional rival with the playoffs on the line. So I'm going to go with the Chargers as well.
All right, we will see on that day. Will we get good Raiders or bad Raiders, or good Chargers or bad Chargers, or who
Or
knows? Maybe it's a
mediocre Raiders and slightly above average Chargers. Who knows?
who knows? It could be an offensive shootout. Who knows?
They're both
Next,
inconsistent, honestly.
next we've got Cowboys at Eagles. So I'm actually going to go with the upset pick. I'm going to pick the Eagles. The Eagles are at
Woo
home.
boy.
They're playing the Cowboys, a division rival. The Eagles have put up a lot of points in the past few games. They've shown they can score points. I know the last game they didn't have many, but they still won the game. And
Shout
so
out to Nick Sirianni, ex-offensive coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. You go, buddy.
I just think that the Eagles have a legit shot at this. I mean, I know the fans tried to take out Jalen Hurts the other day, you know, and that might have killed their playoff shot, but it didn't happen. So thankfully. And so, I think the Eagles have a real shot at this. This is a big game for them. And, they're not that far behind the Cowboys, which is kind of crazy to think about because we thought the Eagles were just not going to be that good this year, but and the Cowboys, I think they should be better than they are, but they have proven they're not always in sync and they're not always clicking. I mean, the other day they win by like 40 points. Then last game they lose to Arizona, who's not a bad team. Don't get me wrong.
Baby, bye,
But,
bye, bye.
but
Bye, bye.
it's just interesting to kind of like see how the Cowboys have went from one of the dominant teams in the NFC to just good, but they're not always consistent. So I think the Eagles have a real shot at this. If they lose to the Cowboys, they do. It happens, but I don't know. The Eagles are playing for something here, and I think they can take this.
You know what the funniest thing about the Cowboys is?
What's that?
I'm pretty sure last week they had the 1 seed.
That's hilarious.
Right. I know. So, but when you say that you're surprised that the Cowboys are inconsistent, are you really? Because isn't that the NFC East every year? Every year, all of the teams are inconsistent. Like some of them start out good and then like end badly. Some of them end up bad, but then end good. It's like, the mediocrity of the NFC East never surprises me because it's been that way for practically my entire life, outside of when, the Eagles won the Super Bowl. But I mean, really, outside of that, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. I will say, though, I do think that the Cowboys are better than the Eagles. And I do think that the Cowboys, do they statistically still have a shot at the 1 seed, or have the Packers kind of locked it up now?
The Packers have already locked it up.
Okay. Well, they're still going to want to get the highest seed possible. So, I mean, they're going to be fighting for higher seeding because that will theoretically give them easier competition and, the first round that they play or whatever. I'm going to go with the Cowboys. I think that the defense is going to show up. Not that Jalen Hurts is going to be bad, but I think that the defense will be able to hold them to not enough points to be able to win. But honestly, I don't really know what's up with the Cowboys. I mean, sometimes they look like the most dominant team in the NFL, unarguably, right? And then other weeks, you don't know what happened to them. It's like one week they're like killing someone by 40, and the next week they get crushed by 30. It's like, well, you don't really know what you're going to get. So, but I do think this week that the Cowboys are going to win. I'm pretty sure the Eagles have already locked up
I don't think they locked it, but their chances went way up. I don't think they locked it, but their chances went way up. I wasn't sure if they
had or not. But regardless, I'm pretty sure they're still going to get into the playoffs. So I'm going to take the Cowboys just because I think, generally speaking, they're more talented. The level of consistency concerns me, but it is what it is. Consistency only really matters when you're in the playoffs, because if you do enough to get there and then you're consistent in the playoffs, you can win a championship. So, I mean, as long as you get there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it'll be a very interesting last week. There's going to be plenty of heartbreak, broken TVs, angry fans, tears. Happy fans, tears, joy, or sad.
Dude, apparently there's going to be a bunch of Jaguars fans wearing clown masks with their owner's mustache. That's like league known to be an epic mustache. They're like all going to wear clown masks with his mustache on them because they want him out. Side note, the Colts haven't won in Jacksonville since, I believe, 2014. And that's the team that we're playing to get into the playoffs. Am I really that worried because Jacksonville is just terrible this year? No. But is there a small, tiny piece of me that thinks, who always plays us hard? Jacksonville. I mean, last year we literally lost our first game to them. So am I like the tiniest bit scared? Yes. But do I think that generally speaking we'll be fine? Yes. If we miss the playoffs because we can't beat the Jaguars, we don't deserve to be there anyways. So there.
All right. Hot take from Chelsea, but it's not really a hot take, honestly.
It's really not. If you can't beat the Jags, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs.
All right. Well, there you have it. Episode 31 in the books. So thank you everyone for listening. Chelsea, do you want to outro us?
Yeah, sure, dude. So, hey, everyone, tune back in next week for more content. In the meantime, follow us on Twitter @_LCFootball_, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube @LaunchCodesFootball. I'm Chelsea.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll see you next week, or you can listen to us next week, depending on how you get your content. This was awkward, but I'm pointing at you.
That's fair.
Be involved with us.
Do what you do. It's okay. All right, everyone, take care. Have a good night or morning, whatever you're doing. So thanks for listening.
See ya.